This episode of Rhizome is brought to you in part by the Synthesis Security Group and Fuzzy Wuzzy Signal Processing, a venture of Swanke. Copyright 2026. All rights reserved.
Welcome to this explainer. Today we're unpacking a really fascinating, unassuming piece of advice from a 52-year-old Gen X man that actually unlocks an ancient, universal survival code. In a highly unpredictable world, understanding how to navigate massive changes is absolutely vital. So we're going to dive into a concept that completely redefines how we view strength. And we'll see how the very things we often think make us safe might actually be making us incredibly vulnerable.
Here's the roadmap for our journey today. We'll start with the modern comfort trap, compare the oak and the bamboo, look at wisdom from both the West and the East, and wrap it all up with the universal law of resilience.
All right, jumping right into section 1, the modern comfort trap, and why predictability is actually a trap. So, you know how we're all kind of conditioned these days to want everything fast, seamless, and, well, predictable? Well, a 52-year-old Gen X man dropped this quiet piece of wisdom that totally challenges that modern pursuit. He said, learn how to redefine your comfort zone. Be flexible. The bamboo bends while the oak branch breaks. It's a short quote, sure, but man, it is a profound diagnosis of exactly where we go wrong. Think about it. When we try to eliminate literally all the friction from our lives to optimize for instant predictability, we're not actually making ourselves safer. We are just building a trap of brittleness that's perfectly disguised as safety. We try to construct a reality where everything has to go exactly according to plan. So what happens when a real structural shock hits? We shatter. It's like we've completely mistaken a lack of friction for actual, genuine resilience. Now, redefining your comfort zone doesn't mean you need to make your life intentionally miserable. Nobody wants that. It's actually about building up a really high tolerance for uncertainty. It's about expanding your own capacity so that when things inevitably get uncomfortable, you don't just panic. When you get comfortable being uncomfortable, you fundamentally stop fearing the wind. Moving on to section 2, oak versus bamboo, and how these represent two very different approaches to structural shocks. Look, sooner or later, structural shocks are going to hit us. And when they do, we generally see two distinct approaches. On one hand, you've got the oak approach. This is rigidity masking as strength. It's holding on so incredibly tightly to a specific expectation that when the pressure finally mounts, the branch just snaps. But then you have the bamboo approach. This is adaptability as true power. You're expanding your capacity to absorb the impact, to yield, and to spring right back without ever losing your roots. It's a total game changer. Let's dive into section 3, Wisdom of the West, looking at some fables and ancient teachings. Now, just to prove this isn't some modern internet cliche, let's look back at history. The perfect Western counterpart to the bamboo metaphor is Aesop's famous fable of the oak and the reed. You probably know this one. The massive oak scoffs at this humble little reed for bowing to every single breeze. But what happens when a massive hurricane hits? The oak stands stiff until its roots literally snap. The reed, on the other hand, just lies flat, lets the gale pass right over, and then stands upright again. It goes to show that stubborn pride might look like strength, but yielding is how you survive to fight another day. And as we move into Middle Eastern and Hebrew traditions, we see this exact same warning against rigid power. Rabbi Simeon Ben Elazar famously taught, "May a man always be as soft as a reed and not as hard as a cedar." In that context, the cedar was the ultimate symbol of royal, masculine power, and yet ancient wisdom explicitly warns us against mimicking it. The lower points out that a magnificent, rigid cedar will be completely uprooted and destroyed the second a really strong south wind blows. Meanwhile, that soft reed, it just lets all the winds of the world blow against it. It sways back and forth, and when the wind finally stops, the reed is still standing there. All right, on to section 4, Wisdom of the East, covering Taoist, martial, and Hindu traditions. What is absolutely fascinating here is that Eastern cultures arrived at the exact same unbreakable law entirely on their own. In the Tao Te Ching, Lao Tzu explicitly links stiffness to death and flexibility to life. Over in Japanese martial lore, the entire combat system of Juju, which literally translates to the soft art, was born from simply observing heavy snow. Practitioners noticed that thick, rigid pine bridges would just snap under the weight of the snow. But the slender willow branches, they bent, let the snow slide right off, and snapped back completely unbroken. If we look over at Indian storytelling and Sanskrit wisdom epics, the metaphor shifts a bit to match the environment, but the core lesson is identical. They frame life's massive changes like a violent, raging river flood rushing down a mountain channel. This flood sweeps away massive, ancient trees because they refuse to yield their ground, completely carrying them away. Obviously, this represents huge life events, like a sudden market crash, a massive career shift, or an unexpected personal loss. In stark contrast, the small Kush rivergrass doesn't even try to fight the flood. It bends low and just lets the torrent flow right over the top of it. Because if you fight the momentum of a massive life change head-on, it's gonna tear you up by your roots. But if you bend, that allows the storm's incredible velocity to pass safely over you, so you can rise again totally unharmed. Bringing it all home in Section 5, the universal law of resilience and bending across cultures. Okay, now that we've literally crossed millennia and continents, let's pull all of this together. It's wild to look at. Every major human tradition, completely independent of one another, warns us about the exact same thing. Whether it's the Western oak taking on a hurricane, the Middle Eastern cedar facing the south wind, the East Asian pine dealing with heavy snow, or those Indian trees fighting a river flood, rigidity always leads to destruction, every single time. Meanwhile, the flexible reed, the willow, and the kusha grass always survive. So, what's the ultimate takeaway for your own life? It's this universal principle right here. Do not confuse rigidity with character. Now, yes, it is absolutely essential to stand firm on your core values, but you cannot force external circumstances to conform to some outdated playbook. When life inevitably changes the rules, holding tightly to how things should be is exactly what shatters you. True resilience isn't just taking a punch without moving. It's having the capacity to shift your stance, absorb the momentum, and adapt, all while keeping your roots firmly planted in what truly matters. I want to leave you today with a real challenge to your own comfort zone. When the next storm hits, and trust me, the wind is definitely coming in the form of economic shifts, industry disruptions, or personal challenges, will you snap under the pressure, or will you yield to survive? Honestly ask yourself, what kind of root system are you building today? Are you cultivating the rigid pride of the oak, or the unbreakable adaptability of the bamboo? Thanks for exploring this with me today, and I highly encourage you to start expanding that comfort zone.
Now available exclusively on Amazon Kindle Ebooks, Rhizome Summer 2026, a collection of essays, Rhizome Fall 2026 Book 2.